What, besides 9/11, is your personal WTF did just happen moment of the century? The 2004 Indian Ocean earthquake and tsunami. The death numbers were absolutely unreal. 250,000 people died and the devastation of towns and villages after was apocalyptic. I had watched 9/11 on TV and that was huge, but as I'm not American it wasn't as significant, but that tsunami in '04 was death and destruction on a huge scale. The Japanese tsunami was also a terrifying reminder of Mother Nature at her worst. The Virginia Tech massacre on the 16th of April, 2007. That's when I started trying to figure out the best route out of any room I teach in for me and my students, and strategies for greatest possible safety if I can't get us out. Unfortunately, the new building I teach in is a lot less safe than the one I was in at the time, in that regard. Same. I think that was one of the first major school shootings that I remembered. Sandy Hook shooting. And even more f'd up is the deniers that harass the families. One recently was sentenced for threatening the life of one of the victims' father, saying it was a hoax. I can't believe I had to scroll so far down for this. I mean, school shootings happen, but they've generally been in high schools or colleges. This guy targeted freaking first graders. Father had a seizure out of the blue. He is slowly dying of brain cancer and surgery has left him cognitively impaired. Incredibly hard to watch a loved one slowly fade. I wish you strength and better fortune. I watched the news of the Aurora theater shooting live. I had taught in the closest school district the year prior, and a midnight release of a Batman movie sound like exactly the kind of thing my students would love to do. On a morning I should have been relaxing before a medical procedure, I spent it calling students and fellow teachers and administrators to find out if any of my students had been in the theater. The only person I knew who died turned out to be a guy from my church camp. But watching it go down while calling people at an absurdly early hour of the morning was a big WTF is this world coming to moment for me. I lived right down the street at the time. I'm also a huge Batman fan. I got 2 calls. I saw it at a different theater. The impeachment of the Korean president. I've been living in South Korea for 5 years now, and even though the previous president won apparently fairly handily, I have never in my entire time here met someone who liked her. So it's not so much the impeachment, it's the circumstances that led up to it, which involve a cult, the deaths of about 300 children, possible plastic surgery, horseback riding, a gigolo, a personal trainer, substandard clothing. The details go on and on. It is one of the strangest political scandals I have ever heard, although the Trump stuff is coming close. The person who was president of Korea a few months ago is now in prison. It's insane. Honestly, the Ebola outbreak a few years back, I'm nowhere near the country is affected by Ebola, but I remember feeling absolutely sick to my stomach that en masse people were being struck down with such a nightmarish virus. It freaked me out at how easily it spreads from person to person, and the thought of dying as a result of it was just, it boggled my mind. It always seemed to be something that was joked about, and while I know it was always sort of around to a degree, seeing footage of all of the rudimentary treatment centers and ill children suffering the effects of it broke my heart. Chilling stuff. What hurt my heart the most was how so many rural families in the affected regions refused to let their ill relatives seek treatment from Red Cross, Doctors Without Borders, etc. because of their superstitions about Western medicine. Tribal religious leaders told their congregations that the foreign aid workers were killing Ebola patients so they could sell their traditional remedies. When American Airlines Flight 587 crashed on November 12, 2001, I was watching the news as the story broke. All I could think was, oh, no, not again. That moment of absolute dread is something I'll never forget. Then the I'm so grateful it just crashed feelings afterwards. The sudden deaths of a couple close friends. And then the current political situation. Worldwide, of course. I thought I was the only one who remembered that. I dropped £1 and I swear to fricking god a pavement ate it because it was just nowhere to be seen and I really wanted a can of Coke. £1. You are confusing the Americans, please stop. Brexit and Trump. Both times they were so sure at the beginning of broadcasting results that it'd go Hillary stay, but by the end of the nights we know it was different. I mean, in the UK people went to sleep assuming stay had won and woke up to find leave had won. Also the UK election this week. To go for an election hoping to increase your majority, but instead lose your majority is a crazy WTF moment. I still laugh when I think about it. The London Bridge terror attacks from earlier this month. It was like, it's happened 3 times this year and that the message the police were sending out was to run as fast as you can. I can only imagine how horrific that would be in person. I feel it's an underlying worry for most people in the UK, for when the next one will be. Yesterday, high of 95F, 35C, and we still got so much hail that they literally had to break out the snow plows. I didn't know such a thing was possible. Not really life-changing, but it was definitely a WTF moment. I am surprised it is not listed, but a black man was elected president. I am older, and I voted for President Obama. But if you had asked me in 2007 if he could win, I would have said no way. I thought I might see a black president in my lifetime, but not in 2008. The fact that no one has mentioned this is a testament to how quickly things have changed, and gays can marry, but for a white older person with a grandchild who remembers the race riots, this is stunning to me still. 7/7 bombing. It was the first terrorist attack I remember and experience since I lived in London. As a country we've had bombs for years through the Germans in war or the IRA, but this was the first I'd seen and can remember being shown on the news. Kevin Rudd being overthrown by Julia Gillard, who won the Australian election before being overthrown by Kevin Rudd, who then got beaten by Tony Abbott in the next election, who was then overthrown by Malcolm Turnbull, totaling to 4 Prime Minister changeovers in Australia over 2 voting periods. Also what very near amounts to Australia's low-key offshore concentration camps for refugees. I hate being Australian sometimes. The government doesn't represent me. When the wrong winner for Best Picture was announced, this might seem like I'm fricking around and being unnecessary, but it's true. I'm fairly young, so I've always lived in a world where terrorism is normal. I expect it around every turn. The wrong winner being announced for Best Picture? Wouldn't have seen it coming from a mile away. Sorry for the non-serious answer, but I feel like this thread needed something else other than Trump, Brexit, or terror attacks. And the wrong Miss Universe being announced. Literally saw on Miss Columbia's face when she realized she didn't actually win and Miss Philippines won instead. The Pulse Massacre. 1 year ago today, I'd just woken up on a Sunday morning and Reddit was kind of vague and useless about a thing happening. I guess some threads were deleted, so I wound up checking Google News and was freaking horrified. The only people I know in Orlando are LGBT, and they were out at clubs that night. They were going to visit Pulse, but decided against it. Thank frick. I live in Orlando and woke up to my girlfriend making 1,000 calls to our friends as she was up when it first was announced. The most haunting thing was the Pulse Facebook page that just had a message at the time of "Get out of Pulse and keep running." The death of Princess Diana. I live in Canada, so it was 3 or 4 AM when the news broke. I was 14 at the time and staying up way too late watching TV. I was channel surfing and saw the news, freaking out. I thought it was a really horrible joke. I didn't believe it and thought whoever had thought this joke up was disturbed. After washing up later that day I found out it was true. Totally crushed me. Thing is, I wasn't a huge fan, but I thought about her sons and what they must have been going through. I'm in the UK, about the same age as you. My mum woke me up to tell me that and 9/11 are the clearest news events in my memory. So strange that most people here are too young to think of these. The Boston Marathon bombings. Not just because I'm from Boston, but because this was the first time I fully saw and understood that nowhere in America is truly safe right now. I 100% agree. There was a whole manhunt and everything. Scary times. The miracle on the Hudson. We were finishing some overtime downtown and traveling north on the Hudson Parkway. All of a sudden we see a bunch of people, helicopters and traffic. We look west and there is a plane in the river. I think my most recent one was Donald Trump winning the US presidency. I got drunk on election night and went to bed before the counts. And when my husband woke me up to tell me about it, I couldn't even conceive of it at first. But the one that really grabbed me was Fukushima. I remember staying up late watching that coverage with my mom. When the older men announced they'd be going into the cleanup so the younger men didn't have to, we just started crying. Trump winning the election. And this isn't me bitching because I'm a liberal, but seriously, I didn't expect the hot-headed reality TV star to win the election, or even be the Republican candidate for that matter, especially with the crap he was spewing. Sometimes he sounded like a lunatic, others he sounded like a second grader running for class president. He literally sounded like he was trying to foil his own campaign. The attack on Parliament Hill, Canada. For me, never thought that something like that could happen here. Also the election of Trump. Lots of young people here, so coming from an European scene here. 1. Fall of the Berlin Wall. 2. Fall of the Soviet Union. This was the biggest WTF for me, used to the USSR-USA rivalry. Both of those were in the previous century. Besides 9/11, besides Trump, besides the Cubs winning the World Series, one of the things that stands out in my mind is this: when the Soviet Union fell apart, it totally blindsided everyone in the West, to the extent that I was driving over to my girlfriend's place, listening to events on the radio, and I heard a CIA analyst being interviewed, saying, well, we have no reason to suspect that all those Soviet nukes are going to get launched, or sold, or stolen, but honestly, we just have no idea right now. One I haven't seen yet, the LAPD manhunt back in like 2013. They were going crazy trying to catch the ex-cop, shooting up random people and cars. I remember being glued to the TV with my roommates. I think a lot of PPL were actually roommate for him not to get caught. They end up trapping him in the house and burning it down with him inside, if I remember right. Cause you know, innocent until proven guilty. Can't corner the donor. When Boston shut itself down during the manhunt for the marathon bomber, the city deserted, no one at work, certain neighborhoods on lockdown, watching the news and seeing home, it still feels unreal. The years from 2007 to 2017, when the US went from being a fairly easy place in which to find a job, to a country that makes it nearly impossible to apply for an office job. Companies hide behind computers and wonder why they can't find qualified candidates. In my lifetime, Columbine shook the country in a way no other massacre did. The media went apeshit and blamed musicians and TV. Politicians seized the train as a way to pass draconian legislation, and for the first time in my memory, the deadly fringe effects of bullying were being examined. Yes, Virginia Tech and Sandy Hook were worse for their body counts, but we treated the reactions with a degree of scrutiny only learned by our time with Columbine. For better or worse, I'm surprised no one has mentioned this, but the dissolution of the Soviet Union, it changed the world, really, in countless ways. Heck, my life in America is a direct, or indirect, result of Soviet policy. The Challenger explosion. I was at work, and we had the launch description playing on the radio. We were so stunned, sat glued to the radio, hoping for news of survivors. Not a lot of work got done that day. I will never forget that one. Our neighbor rushed over and said the shuttle just exploded. I ran outside and could still see the smoke trails from the launch. I live in Florida. They separated at a point where they should not have. Ran in and turned on the TV and was glued to it the rest of the day. The O.J. Chase and Kurt Cobain suicide. I'm pretty sure they both happened in '94. I was in high school when both of those things happened, and as someone who grew up in the '80s early '90s, it just seemed like cray crap like that just didn't happen that much. After that, it seemed like the dang broke on WTF moments. I'm sure most of that is perception though. Brexit probably. I remember going to school the next day and all the teachers and any students that had a strong interest in it were in shock. I was doing a lot of psychedelic drugs when Heath Ledger died. No joke, that crap stuck with me for years. Every now and then I kinda forget that he died. He was one of my favorite actors after A Knight's Tale. Then I remember and get a little sad. When I came back to work from a week vacation and was told I was fired, Apparently those minor mistakes I had made weren't so minor after all, but at least I refused to shake my ex-boss's hand, so at least I have that going for me, which is nice. Every single time I think about 9/11 and how the world changed after it happened, I just feel horrified about the level of its WTFness. So, the Democratic primary race. Bernie Sanders won the popular vote in several states, yet somehow, Hillary got more delegates from those states. It showed how skewed political parties are here in the US, and that regardless of who the actual people want, the party will do everything to keep the candidate they want and can well control. The Republicans tried this as well, but you can only fudge numbers so much, and with too many candidates trying for the spot, the votes were spread too thin, and Trump ended up taking it. Those are just the superdelegates. A lot of them end up going with the overall popular vote winner. They aren't pledged to their state's popular vote totals and they don't vote in a way that swings the overall result. Election of a two-termed black president. I'm not saying this is a bad thing. It was good emo, but 90s me would have never thought it was going to happen this soon. Trump winning the election was a big one. Didn't really believe it during those first couple hours, and as the night wore on. In 1980, I heard a loud boom that sounded like a gas tank exploding nearby. I lived in Vancouver then. I went out to my front balcony and heard echoes reverberating from distant valleys for over 2 minutes. It was later that I learned it was Mount St. Helens blowing its top. Trump getting elected, due to my recent interest in politics and being young, was a big WTF moment for me. I watched them paint the states red or blue that whole night while laughing my butt off as Trump kept getting more states. Brexit. I worry that the world sees all us Brits as spiteful, self-defeating EU haters, but half of us were absolutely devastated the morning we woke up and discovered we'd pulled the trigger. I'm still not over it. I mean, this is the obvious one, but Donald Trump getting elected. This was the man who was a reality show star, a notorious cheat in his business dealings, the guy who killed the USFL to try and get himself an NFL franchise, a man who took a stone cold stunner at WrestleMania, a man who admitted that fame and money let him grab women by the pee, someone who led the birth certificate charge for years with no results, and he just became president with no concrete plans to improve America. His keystone platform was building a wall everyone knew he couldn't build. His campaign had no substance other than lulz liberals and make America great again. In addition to all the political turmoil and terrorist attacks, the Hudson plane landing, it was insane that the pilot could save literally everyone by landing that way. When Putin shuffled sideways and let Medvedev run the country for a term only to extend term limits for Putin the next election, I remember thinking that the Soviets were back. From personal experiences, the moment Greece went bankrupt and had to call in the IMF, this was the end of an era and almost half of my life has been under visible financial struggle and social collapse. The Cubs winning the World Series, and then days later Trump getting the presidency. I know these two things weren't technically related, but somehow I still felt guilty, like my team winning had caused the universe to split off into some weird alternate reality. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.